part of the administration for some time.
April? Sarah, a couple questions, two questions. Going back to the issue of Eric Garner, a couple of weeks ago when I asked you about Alton Sterling, Stephon Clark, and the issue of Eric Garner, you said it was a local issue. Does this White House give the directive now to the Justice Department that it's a local matter and that's why it's kind of been held up? Is that what's going on now with this Eric Garner case?
I can't speak to anything specific in an ongoing process that's taking place at the Department of Justice. We haven't given specific instruction to them other than to follow the law, and when it is a local issue, there's not a lot we can do, but when the Department of Justice has a role to play, we want them to be independent and follow the law on that front.
And last thing, I want to follow up on Jim. When you said breeding, the president was very clear in his statement about this issue. He said in a tweet, there's a revolution going on in California. So many sanctuary areas want out of this ridiculous crime-infested and breeding concept. What did he mean by breeding?
Again, the president has recognized that this is a major problem, and a lot of people, even in California, want to see the issue of sanctuary cities addressed, and the president's doing what he can to do that.
What does breeding mean to this president? Because when you think of breeding, you think of animals breeding, populating.
I'm not going to begin to think what you think. Certainly, I think that it can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, but the president is talking about a growing problem, and I addressed that with Jim. I don't have anything else to add.
People having kids, though.
Lolly?
Thank you. I wanted to ask you about Afghanistan. There has been quite a number of attacks in Afghanistan in the last few days. This is the first fighting season after President announced his South Asia policy. How do you see the situation in Afghanistan now?
I'm sorry, what was the last part of your question?
How do you see the situation in Afghanistan now?
We're continuing to move forward with the strategy that was announced, and I don't have any other policy announcements at this time. Take one last question, Brian.
Thank you very much. Two quick questions. One, just to define what the president meant about breeding. To be specific, he's not talking about people having babies. Yes?
Not that I'm aware of. I'd have to ask him to dig into that deeper. I just said not that I'm aware of, and I would have to ask him to be more specific.
Okay. And in regards to the Mueller investigation,
Guys, I'm sorry, I'm trying to.
in regards to the Mueller investigation, I understand this administration says that there's no collusion. So if we take the president at his word, he can't be aware of everything that went on underneath him by everyone who works for him. So if there's someone who worked for him underneath him that is guilty or is prosecuted by the Mueller team, would he not support those who did wrong, even if he was unaware of it?
Certainly, we want everyone to follow the law, but I'm not going to comment on a hypothetical situation. The president has been clear. He and his campaign were not involved in collusion. If he had, I'm pretty sure, okay, you guys would have found that out, and I'm addressing that. Brian.
Right? He would support
the president would absolutely support the law and individuals following the law. What the president doesn't support is a year wasted distracting the world and the country from the great things that are happening in this country, from talking about issues that Americans actually care about. That's what the president would probably tell you to stay focused on. And with that, thanks, guys. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you, sir.
The White House briefing wrapping up there. As you can see, hello, everyone. I'm Sandra Smith in for Dana Perino this afternoon, and this is the Daily Briefing. Sarah Sanders taking questions on everything at the White House just now, from Michael Cohen to the special counsel to the nomination of Mike Pompeo. Sanders speaking as French President Emmanuel Macron just arrived in the United States along with his wife for a 3-day visit with President Donald Trump. His motorcade just arrived at the Blair House, which is directly across the street from the White House, where he'll be staying this evening following the big state dinner. A few other things coming out of the White House press briefing just a few moments ago. The president, Sarah Sanders, speaking on behalf of the president, weighing in on North Korea, the topic of the hour, saying certainly the goal is denuclearization of the peninsula, and we're going to continue the maximum pressure campaign that has been going on. So a 20-minute briefing just wrapping up a few moments ago. And Kevin Corke, she touched on just about everything at the White House. What did you learn?
Yeah, that she did. Listen, there are a couple of things that really stood out. First of all, she didn't want to sort of get ahead of the president. We've heard her say this before, Sandra. I don't want to get ahead of what the president may or may not decide to do, or may not decide to even talk about with respect to specific policy arguments, be it the Iran nuclear deal, for example, or Syria, or even the environment, going back to the old Paris Climate Accord. But she did talk about North Korea in particular, and I think she said something important. She painted sort of a broad picture of the relationship between these two men, and she noted the pragmatism in their relationship, and she also said she expected them to work very well together during the visit.
In May, could happen in June.
What you do have are two leaders who have a great deal of respect for one another, who have a great friendship. Certainly both have a great deal of interest in doing what is best for their country, but being able to have very open and candid conversations because of the relationship, not only that the leaders have built, but that has existed between the two countries long before either of these individuals arrived on the scene.
So what we really learned today were a couple of things, Sandra. First of all, this is going to be a very important visit, not just the fact that it's the very first state visit for the president. It's important because we're talking about, again, trying to come up with at least a battle plan, if you will, if you're a European leader. Keep in mind, later this week, the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, will be here. So yes, Emmanuel Macron and the president will talk about Syria. They will talk about the Iran nuclear deal. But this is a week of diplomacy and major decisions. We learned a bit about that today, and of course, we'll learn a lot more when Mr. Macron has a chance to step up to the microphone here. Sandra?
And the state dinner will be this evening, but the president and Macron will be meeting one-on-one tomorrow, Kevin. What are going to be the big issues the two leaders discuss? I'm sure North Korea is up there.
No question. North Korea, they're going to talk a great deal about Syria. In fact, I asked Sarah Sanders today about this idea that maybe a precipitous withdrawal from Syria by the Americans could create a vacuum, for example, would be even more problematic than actually being there. Now, I understand the president has made it very clear he would like to get the U.S. out of there and let leaders in the region take care of that problem. But the French President Macron actually agrees with the president that there does need to be some leadership in the region, but certainly he also is of the opinion that a quick withdrawal by the Americans could really be a massive problem. They're going to try to talk about that, the Iran nuclear deal, and don't forget trade. That's going to be a major issue. EU trade, tariffs, and some possibilities of increasing taxes on European autos coming our way. It's all going to be part of the agenda. Sandra, back to you.
Kevin Corke, thank you from the White House for us. Let's bring in Matthew Koenig, Deputy Director for Strategy for the Atlantic Council and an Associate Professor at Georgetown University. Good afternoon, sir. Thank you for coming on with us. As we just saw the White House briefing wrap up, we await this one-on-one meeting with the president and Macron. And as we just mentioned, certainly North Korea will be a big deal, but also the Iran deal, which, as we know, Macron has been very clear on the direction he wants this president to go.
Well, the Iran deal as currently structured is not in the U.S. interest. The limits on Iran's program will expire over time. And so Trump has said he's going to renegotiate to try to get a better deal. Despite what Macron's saying, my understanding is that the working levels of government, the United States, the French, the British, are actually making progress. The Germans are making progress toward closing some of the loopholes in the deal. And I think that's the right way forward.
He has until May 12th to make a decision on the Iran deal. Which way do you ultimately think the president will go?
Well, the president has been very clear that if the Europeans don't agree to fix some of the flaws in the deal, that on May 12th he will tear it up. So we still have a month or so to go. I'm hopeful that the United States and our European allies can come to an agreement to close some of the holes in the deal on ballistic missiles, on inspections, and on the sunset clauses. I'm told that actually two out of those three things, there's already agreement. Just working on the third on the sunset clauses. So I think there is some hope for fixing the deal.
Yeah, and Macron's take is don't leave the deal now unless there is a better option on the table. We will learn more in the coming hours and days what happens next with all of this. Matthew Koenig, we've got some breaking news. We appreciate your time this afternoon. Fox News alert for you. The manhunt for the suspect in the Tennessee Waffle House shooting appears to be over. Police saying moments ago Travis Reinking is in custody. Jonathan Seri is live from Antioch, Tennessee, with what we are learning at this moment. Jonathan?
Hi, Sandra. Yes, a lot of activity. The story unfolding as we speak. Moments ago, we saw numerous police vehicles, squad cars driving on this highway behind us, sirens blaring, lights flashing, and then Metro Nashville PD tweeted out, quote, "Breaking, murder suspect Travis Reinking is in custody, arrested moments ago." Authorities had been searching the Antioch community, this small suburb about a 30 to 40 minute drive outside of Nashville. They were somewhat optimistic that he would still be in this general area. He had left his pickup truck at the Waffle House after the shooting. He was last seen on foot wearing only some black pants. And so while they weren't ruling out the possibility that he was out of town or even out of state, they were really focusing the bulk of their search in this general area. And it appears that those efforts have now paid off. Sandra, back to you.
Any other details you can give us about now the suspect in custody, as far as what we're learning from authorities at this moment? As we are learning, this has just happened, Jonathan.
Yeah, just happening even as we speak. We don't know the circumstances of his arrest. We know that earlier today, midday, there was a false alarm, unconfirmed reports of some shooting out by a church that was actually the scene of an unrelated mass shooting back in the fall. Squad cars raced out there. They determined that the noises were most likely coming either from hunters or a nearby shooting range. But now Nashville Metro Police confirming that they have the real deal. They have the suspect back in custody.
All right, so Travis Reinking back in custody, arrested moments ago. Waffle House has been tweeting out in response to all of this today. This is an incredibly sad day for the Waffle House family, and they're asking everybody to keep the victims and their families in their thoughts and prayers as we continue to follow this story and this breaking news that suspect is now in custody. Jonathan, are we expecting any sort of news conference or press conference by authorities on the ground there at any time?
Yeah, we do. They haven't officially announced it yet. In fact, ironically, they had just wrapped up a news conference before we saw all of these police cars racing out to the scene behind us to announce that they had had no credible sightings since 8:30 Sunday morning. But I'm sure that we will be hearing from authorities in the very near future, and that a news conference will be announced shortly.
All right, we will continue to follow this story for everybody this morning. We'll keep all those victims in our thoughts as we continue to learn more here. And we're learning more now on a situation in Toronto. Shepard, what do we know?
North of the city, Sandra, just from a short time ago, I'll take you over to the big wall and show you what we have. The latest word is a large van that some have described as being a rental van, some news organizations, though the police have not confirmed that to us. A van jumped a curb in the north of Toronto, drove down a sidewalk, and has struck between 8 and 10 people. You can see paramedics on scene here in the north of Toronto. This is live pictures coming to us from a helicopter on scene. Right now it's a little jittery, but we've seen an elongated crime scene along a major thoroughfare in the north of Toronto. Lots of medics on scene, lots of police blankets and such out. It appeared that they were trying to treat people. Lots of streets closed down. Early reports were this van, whatever it was, left the scene in the early going of this. Now, is this terrorism? We don't know. Police in Toronto, Canadian national authorities have said nothing about that at this moment. Our understanding of things is they're trying to figure out who drove this van and why in the world this may have happened. Described to us as a very busy intersection, and you can see the helicopter trying to get the best pictures possible of all of this. And the folks on the ground now interviewing pedestrians. They have large areas cordoned off at this time. So this is Toronto and Ontario in Canada. A van of some kind has mounted a curb, come up onto the curb, driven down the sidewalk, and struck some 8 to 10 people. Here, emergency services on scene. You can see somebody being loaded onto a stretcher here to be taken to an ambulance and taken away to the hospital. Appears to be a man there, and I can tell you that the authorities on scene have not held any open news conferences yet. As you can see, the situation is still developing right before our eyes. An astounding amount of breaking news today with the suspect in the Waffle House shooting outside Nashville said to be now in custody. We'll go straight to the suburbs of Nashville with information on that from the Nashville Metropolitan Police in a moment. This is unfolding and breaking right now in Toronto, 14 minutes past 2 o'clock in the afternoon there, as they're not yet on daylight savings time. So in Toronto now, people being taken away from this scene. We've been waiting for details. We take the picture full. Let's listen. The Toronto reported that whoever was driving this vehicle has just been taken into custody. We do not yet know who it is that this person was, what it was that this person's motivation might have been, or how in the world this might have happened. Was it some sort of terrible accident as the van came onto the sidewalk, plows into a crowd there in Toronto? I will tell you this, authorities have not said that this was an intentional act. No authorities of any kind and no witnesses have suggested to us that this was intentional. But it certainly is something that raises a red flag in this day for reasons, if you know your history of the last year, for reasons that should be quite clear. And there you can see someone on the ground who, back on cam now for reasons that are obvious. It would appear to us that there is at least one fatality in this situation in Toronto. Getting the latest news from there, the Toronto Sun says that the suspect might be the wrong word, let's just say for now, the person who was driving the van has now been taken into custody. Lots of different reports coming to the scene after this van went up on the curb and struck 8 to 10 people. And the fact of the matter is, we just don't know the details surrounding it yet. You can imagine the position that authorities are in at this moment. This unbelievable thing has happened. Very busy intersection. The van comes up onto the curb, runs over a number of people. Ambulance services come, police come. They're all working on what is a fairly large investigative scene here. You can see the crime tape, for lack of a better word, the yellow tape that's been put up to make sure that no one comes into that area. And they're trying to determine for themselves what it is that has just happened. I'm not sure that there's any clarity to this yet. The authorities certainly haven't held a news conference to this moment. But again, juggling two different breaking news stories and a little bit of guidance from our control room, if we would. I know that the authorities have just issued in Nashville a statement saying that the gunman in the Waffle House shooting is now in custody. This is a suspect from the Waffle House shooting out in Antioch, Tennessee. 4 people killed there, and a hero emerges, removing the gun from this person's hands. We got word earlier today, it was a false alarm that the suspect might have been taken into custody, but now authorities confirmed that, in fact, the suspect in the Waffle House shooting is now in custody. Sandra, back to you.
Shepard, thank you. We want to go to Catherine Herridge now. She's got some color on the area in which this is happening in Toronto. You know this area well, Catherine. What can you tell us about what you're seeing there on the screen?
Well, thank you, Sandra. Good afternoon. I grew up in Toronto, and I can give you some more context on this area of the city. Yonge Street is the main thoroughfare that runs north-south. It begins at Lake Ontario, and it's one of the longest streets in Canada, running over 70 miles. And Finch Avenue is one of the main arteries that runs east and west. And this is a very congested part of the cities because it's also a major hub for the Toronto subway system that's known as the TTC. The other thing about this area is that it's kind of a mixed commercial as well as residential area. So you have businesses, but you also have high-rise condos. And then about 2 or 3 streets away from Yonge Street, so the main artery, you have a number of old residential neighborhoods. So this is a heavily congested area, in part because of the roads involved, also with the impact of the subway system. And as Shepard was just pointing out, this white vans typically are rental vans, the white van running along the sidewalk, taking down a number of pedestrians. So this, if one of the goals was to create the maximum number of casualties, we don't know what the suspect's objectives were in this case, but if that was one of the goals, this would be an area to achieve that mission, Sandra.
What we do know about what you're describing there, Yonge Street, police have closed the southbound lanes of Yonge Street at Finch as officers investigate the scene there. They're also urging people to avoid the area at this time. Catherine, you've got to imagine, as you know, Toronto has a very busy business district as well, and police are saying that the incident occurred just around the 1:30 p.m. hour.
Right, lunch hour.
Obviously,
right,
a very busy hour.
Yeah, that's right. So again, just for people at home who are not familiar with the city or at least this part of Toronto, just imagine your own hometown, you know, the major artery for a business north-south, and then one of the major arteries east-west, and then sort of coupled on that, the subway system, the transit system also has a major let-off point there as well. And as Sandra was just pointing out, it was 1:30, so lunch is breaking. People are going back to work, and it's not only a very large business area, but it's also a heavy residential area. There are a lot of super tall condos in that area. A number of them are retirement communities as well. So it's a very congested area. And again, if the motivation was, and we don't know the motivation of the driver, but if the motivation was to take out the maximum number of casualties, this would be a target of opportunity given the location.
All right, an update coming in right now, Catherine. The driver of that van is now in police custody after fleeing the scene. We were told, police said 8 to 10 people were hit, still trying to get any confirmation of injuries. They do not know. The police do not know the extent of the injuries at this point in time. But the driver of that van, we are now told, is in police custody. And by the way, when you're mentioning the scene there on the ground and the proximity to the subway station, an update here that the TTC has shut down subway service on line 1 between Shepherd and Finch stations as police continue to work the scene there. Catherine, we will continue to bring updates, and we'll have you stick around as well. Thank you for coming on short notice with us there. All right, we will continue to breaking news on this Waffle House shooting as well. The suspect there now in custody. A lot of news breaking at this hour. We'll be right back. News alert, we go back now to Jonathan Serrie in Antioch, Tennessee, with more on the arrest of the suspect in the Waffle House shooting that left 4 dead. Jonathan, residents have been on edge for quite some time, and now he is in police custody.
Yeah, they have indeed. This community of Antioch experienced a church shooting back in the fall, still reeling from that. And now this shooting at the Waffle House, clearly shocking everyone here, and people breathing a collective sigh of relief that now that the suspect, Travis Reinking, is in custody. Metro Nashville Police Department confirming that they arrested him in a wooded area near Old Hickory Boulevard and Hobson Pike. We spoke with a witness who just happened to be driving by there. He says it's near a relatively new apartment complex. He saw all of the squad cars pulling into that area and then pull that suspect. But again, Metro Nashville Police Department confirming that Travis Reinking, the suspect in the on Sunday morning's Waffle House shooting that claimed 4 lives and left an additional 4 people injured, is in custody. We expect to hear more from police in a news conference later today, but that's what we know for now, Sandra.
And that is significant. This manhunt has been underway for quite some time, Jonathan, after 4 people were left dead in that Tennessee restaurant. So as of about 2 o'clock Eastern time today, we learned that authorities have made an arrest of a man that stormed that restaurant and shot 4 people with an assault rifle. 29 years old, Travis Reinking, has been taken into custody. Jonathan, I know you told us earlier to expect at some point an update from authorities on the ground.
Yeah, we do expect to hear from them any minute. Right now, they're just communicating via Twitter. Not only Metro Nashville Police Department, but also the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation tweeted out a photo of the suspect with one banner word across it saying captured. So multiple law enforcement agencies confirming that this much wanted suspect is now in custody, but we expect to hear a little more from authorities later today, including the search circumstances. What led them to that wooded area? How did the arrest go down? Did he give up willingly? Was there some violence? We simply don't know at this point. We do know from a press conference earlier today that they had found an empty laptop bag at a truck stop just outside of town. Someone had found it, went home, and they found, even though it was empty, there was a handwritten name tag inside that laptop bag that had the suspect's name, and so they immediately alerted authorities. But police could not determine whether the bag had been left there immediately after the crime, whether it had been left there before the crime, and so it was just one of many clues that they had been finding. But now they have found what they were looking for all along. The suspect, Travis Reinking, now in Metro Nashville police custody.
Jonathan Siri, thank you. Live in Antioch, Tennessee, where that suspect is now in police authority. And we go to the other breaking news of the hour, and that is in Toronto, where a short time ago we learned of a white van that had struck at least 8 people, 8 to 10 people, according to Toronto police. We're still waiting for more information on injuries, but we do know that the suspect and the driver of that vehicle did flee the scene. So we are looking for an update there. We're going to have one for you on the other side of this break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Police in Toronto are on the scene after a van struck between 8 and 10 pedestrians just a short time ago. We have so far gotten an update that that suspect is now in police custody. Obviously, this happening right in the middle of a busy day in Toronto. 1:30 p.m. Eastern time is when police say that they got the call. Fox News alert Brian Yennis joins us now with the latest. Brian, what do you have?
Hi, Sandra. Well, from what we know, at least 8 to 10 people have been injured from this hit, from this van. We know it was a white van. It jumped the curb on Yonge, south of Finch Avenue. As Catherine Herridge was reporting before, this part of Toronto is a busy part. This is a commercial area. It's also a subway hub of the city. Right now, what we can understand is the police said that this suspect of this van that you're seeing right there, a Ryder white van, is in custody. That is what we know so far. A witness to this has reported to the Global News. A witness named Nick says that he saw the vehicle on the sidewalk, quote, in control while it was hitting pedestrians on Yonge. No word on the driver. Well, we now know that that driver has been taken into custody. You're looking at photos now. Obviously, paramedics have responded to the scene. They're taking care of the wounded. We still do not know the extent of the injuries. Right now, we can say, from what we can see with the numbers, 8 to 10. But again, this white Ryder van jumped the curb there on a very busy intersection there in Toronto. The subway stop station and the subway 1 train there in Toronto has been suspended along Shepherd and Finch. And you can just see right there, right now, paramedics, a very active scene, taking care of the wounded. Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister, has said that our thoughts are obviously with all of those affected. We're still gathering information. We will keep Canadians updated. No word yet on the motive, but obviously a very active situation as paramedics continue to treat the wounded of this terrible accident. Well, from what we can understand, terrible incident.
Brian Yennis, we're waiting on an update on injuries. We'll continue to follow that story. It's breaking at this hour, and we're also following this story. The Waffle House shooting, 4 people dead. The shooter there has now been taken into custody. Jonathan Siri, do you have an update for us on the situation there?
We have a new photo, actually, of the suspect taken into custody. Metro Nashville police confirmed that they arrested Travis Reinking in a wooded area. Witness spotted this all going down near a relatively new apartment complex, that wooded area adjacent to the apartment complex. Authorities have yet to say what led them to that woods, but they brought him out of the woods. Our witness Eyewitness saw him there in the apartment complex parking lot being loaded into a squad car. And then we have this new picture being tweeted by Metro Nashville Police Department confirming that Travis Reinking is indeed in custody. Reinking, of course, is the prime suspect in the mass shooting that took place early Sunday morning at the Waffle House here in Antioch, a suburb just outside of Nashville, Tennessee.
All right, Jonathan, Sarah, we continue to follow this story for everyone. And the White House weighing in just a few moments ago as this manhunt for that suspect has been underway for quite some time, saying the president offers his condolences to the victims and their families. We await more information on that breaking story. Meanwhile, here's a Fox News alert, and we are awaiting a key vote on CIA Director Mike Pompeo's nomination for Secretary of State, where the stage is now set for an historic snub by the Senate Foreign Relations Committee ahead of the full Senate's vote. Rich Edson is live on Capitol Hill. Rich, how will things play out?
Good afternoon, Sandra. And in just a couple of hours, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee will consider the nomination of Mike Pompeo to be Secretary of State. Though they have a math problem there to get Pompeo the approval of this committee. That's because all the committee's Democrats and one Republican say they're going to vote against Pompeo. The Republican is Kentucky Senator Rand Paul. The president leaned on him publicly last week to try to get him to change his vote. Paul met with Pompeo, but it appears as though that did not do enough to change his mind. The president tweeted this morning, quote, "Hard to believe obstructionists may vote against Mike Pompeo for Secretary of State. The Dems will not approve hundreds of good people, including the ambassador to Germany. They're maxing out the time on approval process for all. Never happened before. Need more Republicans." And certainly more Republicans in the Senate would help with this committee, at least on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, though it appears as though right now Pompeo is short the votes to get him through, Sandra.
Rich, can the Senate still confirm him?
They can. Republicans say they have enough support and they will eventually get Mike Pompeo through the full Senate, not just the committee, but the full Senate. They say that's because a couple of Democrats are jumping on board here to vote with Republicans, or most Republicans, in confirming Mike Pompeo. Heidi Heitkamp came out last week. She's the Democrat from North Dakota. And then today you have Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia. He said in a statement, quote, "During this sensitive diplomatic time, it's important our next Secretary of State understands the grave threats facing our nation and can offer diplomatic solutions to avoid conflict as soon as possible. I believe he will represent our interests well across the world and provide wise counsel to President Trump on our foreign policy." Now, Republicans are pushing to confirm Mike Pompeo in the next few days here. It's unclear what the timing will be because there are a number of different procedural moves. There are a number of ways that Democrats can slow this down even further. But they say, look, later this week, there's an important NATO meeting. Mike Pompeo wants to be there as Secretary of State. There are ongoing negotiations with the European governments to try to change Iran policy, perhaps keep the United States in the Iran nuclear deal. The president's deadline for that is less than 3 weeks away. And then, of course, there is this summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un, which Mike Pompeo, as CIA director, is involved with setting up, but wants to do so as the confirmed Secretary of State. Sandra?
Rich Edson, a lot going on. Thank you. For more on all this, let's bring in Michael Meehan, President and CEO of Squared Communications and former Chief of Staff for Senator Maria Cantwell, and Alex Conant, former Communications Director for Senator Marco Rubio and a partner at Firehouse Strategies. Alex, I'll start with you first. Sort of unprecedented what we may see happen here as we await this key vote.
It is. It's highly unusual. Look, I worked in the U.S. Senate for 5 years, and I can't remember ever seeing anything as political as what we're seeing right now in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. When I worked there, look, Obama was president, and Republicans were willing to vote for his nominees, even if they didn't like them. My former boss, Marco Rubio, voted to confirm Secretary Kerry as Secretary of State, even though he obviously had deep policy disagreements with him. And just last year, Rubio voted to confirm Rex Tillerson, even though he had big problems with Tillerson. But now Democrats, they aren't arguing that Pompeo is not qualified. They're arguing that they don't like Donald Trump, and therefore he shouldn't, I guess, be allowed to have a Secretary of State. It's no way to run the Senate. So I'm glad to see that Mitch McConnell and Senate Republican leaders are going to move forward with the nomination anyways, and that he will be confirmed.
Michael, you USA Today editorial makes that case, titling this morning, this piece confirmed Mike Pompeo to fill the void at state. Unless a nominee has clear ethical or competency failings, presidents should be accorded wide latitude to select top aides whom they trust and agree with. Pompeo passes that test and merits approval. Michael.
Well, if you can't get a majority of the Republican-controlled committee, then there's clearly a diplomatic problem. The way the Democratic senators can send a message that they're unhappy with the way the State Department has been run is to cast their vote the way that they want to and make the point here. I worked for John Kerry for 25 years when he was on the Foreign Relations Committee. They've never not passed the Secretary of State. It's been 75 years since a member of the President's cabinet hasn't gotten out of committee. So this is unprecedented times, but we're in unprecedented times. They need to be more diplomatic if they want to get through the committee.
You know, the White House was asked about that just a few moments ago, and Sarah Sanders responded. A majority of Democrats continue their pointless obstruction to score cheap political points with their base as a willful attempt to undermine American diplomacy. That is the White House's response to that this afternoon. Thanks to both of you. A lot of breaking news this afternoon, and we thank you for standing by. Let's go now to Shepard Smith on the breaking news out of Toronto. Stand by
and
for that.
So much breaking news. Let's listen live as witnesses are describing what they saw on the streets.
That's my brother called, tell me.
Okay, thank you guys.
And that's the latest. Police are saying that a number of people have been struck. We are told that an arrest has been made, though we do not know on what sort of charges. Just stay with this for the moment. We know of at least one fatality, and we have reports of others, though we're really unsure of all of that. Is Catherine Herridge with us? Who is available? We'll be going to Catherine Herridge in just a moment, but this is the scene where the van reportedly went up on the sidewalk and began driving southbound on that sidewalk, striking some 8 to 10 people. Happened now about an hour ago, hitting as many as 10 in the northern part of the city of Toronto. First responders are still on scene. You can see people wandering about, and we've been hearing reports from witnesses there. Catherine's with us now. Catherine, I'm led to believe by authorities in Toronto that an arrest has been made, but I don't know the charges or whether they think this was an intentional act. Do you?
That's right. I've been looking at the websites for the Toronto Star and the Toronto Sun. Those are sort of the main newspapers in Toronto. It's a city I know because I grew up there. And they're saying a suspect is in custody, but they have not identified the suspect, and they've given no indication as to the motive. But I want to just emphasize, when you're watching the scene here, what the significance of this part of the city is. This is a major thoroughfare in Toronto. Yonge Street is the main artery that runs north-south. It begins on Lake Ontario. It travels for dozens of miles north. It may, in fact, be the longest street running north-south in the entire country. And Finch, which is the east-west road that traverses Yonge Street, is also one of the main arteries. And this is an intersection where you also have public transit. It's called the TTC, the Toronto Transit Commission. And it was also a time of day, 1:30, when people were breaking from lunch and heading back to their offices. And as you can see here, I believe that is actually the North York Civic Center right there. So that's the municipality's main seat of sort of government and the conference center. And if you also look at some of the other buildings there, you can see that there are large businesses that are operating there. But you'll also see what appear to be big residential condo buildings. So this is a very dense, very congested part of the city, a very active part of the city. And based on the eyewitness accounts, the driver was up on Yonge Street mowing down pedestrians for the reports are saying 1.2 kilometers. So that's just a little bit over about a mile, which is a considerable length of the area, and would indicate that there was purpose to this and not just, you know, an accident, which would speak to a shorter distance on the sidewalk. And the police are also reporting that the white van was found at the intersection of a street called Ponce Avenue. Ponce Avenue comes just off of Yonge Street, and this is one of the side streets that runs into what I would call sort of the old traditional neighborhoods in Toronto. So single-family dwellings, you know, sort of an area that would be easier to get lost in, right, if you left your vehicle and you were running. But this appears to be the area where the suspect was picked up, Shep.
Wow. Have they had any reports of threats or anything of that kind that you know of?
Well, I have not seen that yet in the reporting, though there was a tweet just within the last few minutes from the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who said that they too are trying to assess what's happened in that northern part of the city, and they're also trying to assess the motivations behind it, but their thoughts and prayers are with the individuals who were affected by this act today. I am not aware of a specific and credible threat to this part of the city, but like the United States, they're always assessing what the threat may be from individuals who become self-radicalized. We don't know if that is the case here, but this is very sort of top of mind or presence of mind in Canada as it is here, Shep.
What would you say would account for the delay from police now? They've announced, Catherine, that a suspect is in custody, but we don't know for what reason, which seems a bit unusual.
Well, I'm just going to speak from my own experience because I don't think we want to speculate too far on what's happening in Toronto because we don't have a lot of information, and that would be a disservice to the story. But typically in law enforcement situations, based on my 17 years of doing this, is that when they pick up an individual, one of the first things they do is they try and gain access to their electronics. So if they've got a cell phone on them, to see who they're in contact with, who their contacts are, and whether other individuals may be involved too. If this was not an accident, if this was something that was very purposeful, the question is whether it may be part of something bigger or whether it's just an isolated event.
Well, we're waiting for more information from police on scene, and certainly our affiliated networks in Canada have been trying to interview witnesses and get more information. The latest we've gotten from the CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, that multiple people are believed to be dead. A reporter who came walking up the street is now quoted as saying, as he was walking to try to get to this scene, he passed a number of people who were deceased in the street. Sadly, a short time ago, one of the helicopters, Catherine, which we were monitoring, appeared to show someone who had lost his life in the street that had not yet even been covered. Let's listen as the local stations interview. This is a 24-hour news network there, interview witnesses, hopefully in English.
What you saw.
Hi, yes, I was just leaving my building here at 5460 Yonge Street. I had just stepped out and lit a cigarette. When I did that, I turned up my head and I saw the van hit a man walking through the intersection. It was a green light. And he actually rolled into the road. So at that point, I ran into the middle of the road and I stopped all the cars. And then just pandemonium broke loose. Just everyone was going crazy. That was pretty much all that I saw. And we stayed with the man to make sure he was okay and no other cars were going to run over him.
Was he okay?
He was conscious, yeah. He couldn't move. His eyes were closed. But he hung in there. Surprising enough, yeah, he hung in there. So I hope he's going to be all right. And the officers asked me to come up to the intersection up here to see if anyone else had been hit. I saw about 3 or 4 bodies lying on the ground. Other people were getting CPR. Then I had to go back and relay that information to him. And that was pretty much it. I just hung out with the cops for about half an hour and just gave some witness information. So.
Can you tell me what the scene looked like when you were walking through it?
It was just clear as day. Just an ordinary day walking, and just saw the guy get hit by a van. That was it. Pieces of the van went flying everywhere. And like I said, I turned my head to make sure there were no cars coming so he didn't get run over again. And I just held there. That was all that I could do.
Did you take a good look at the driver?
Didn't see the driver at all, no. In fact, I didn't really even see the van. It just happened so quickly. My main concern was for the man on the road.
How fast would you say he was going?
I don't know. I'd probably say about 60, 70 kilometers an hour. Hard to say. I mean, I just saw the guy go flying and I heard the bang and just wanted to stop traffic. That's all I wanted to do. So that's it.
Did you see him hit anybody else?
I did not. No, I didn't. But I saw a lot of people lying on the sidewalk. There were in pools of blood, and I was told there were more people further down there. Apparently he's been caught, so that's all I have.
And where exactly did you see him hit someone?
Oh, right at the intersection. The man was walking through the intersection at Yonge and Kempford. He was just walking. He was in the middle of the intersection, and the van just went right into him, plowed right into him. And then apparently he drove down further, and he went onto the sidewalk by the next building, and he hit more people there and just kept going.
Did he go onto the sidewalk, or was he on the road?
Well, the man that I saw get hit was crossing the street, so he was on the road. But as he went further down, it must have gone on the sidewalk because there were people on the sidewalk that got hit.
Did it look like the man that was hit had broken bones?
He couldn't move. He could just barely move a little bit. There was a little bit of blood, but he looked like he was all right. I'm surprised. He got hit really hard.
And how old was he, would you say?
I'd say maybe about 55 years old. Yeah.
What were you doing here today?
Well, I was just going down to North York Center. I just stopped to have a cigarette. If I hadn't have done that, I probably would have been killed as well. I would have been right there with that guy. So I was just going down to North York Center just to do some shopping.
How are you doing right now?
I feel sick to my stomach. What can I say? I just, I've never seen anything like this before, so I'll be all right, I guess. Yeah. What else can we do? So I'm actually just going to the bus now to give a statement to the police officers.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
So on scene, the latest from a 24-hour news network there in Canada, the witness indicating that the van was going 35 or 40 miles per hour when struck someone in the sidewalk. Let's listen to the reporter on scene.
That person, he says, was walking through the intersection when he was plowed through by that van. He said it was going about 60 kilometers an hour, 60, 70 when that happened, and he stopped to help that man. Now, of course, there are more victims here, more pedestrians that have been struck all along Yonge Street. People that have been walking through here just cannot believe that this has happened in Toronto. We'll bring you more witness statements when we have them. Back to you.
And thanks very much. I want to get to our chief intelligence correspondent, Catherine Herridge, with more on the taking in of the suspect. What have you learned, Catherine?
Okay, so CTV News, this is the national broadcaster in Canada, is now reporting that they've had some video shared with them, and it shows the suspect being cornered by police at their white van, and that the suspect starts shaking an object at the police, a dark object is described, and that he claimed, this is according to CTV, that he had a gun and that he had a weapon. So what's coming through to me in these eyewitness accounts and video to CTV News is the speed at which the van was traveling on the street, that the driver hit a woman with a stroller. This is according to an eyewitness. And then when cornered by police, started waving an object at police in a threatening manner and indicated that they had a weapon. If all of these things are true, this would go against the idea that it was some kind of sort of accident, if you will, right, Shepard? The speed, the targeting, and then the weapon.
Well, the car, from the length of the crime scene, Catherine, and I say crime scene because it's sort of the generic term that we use when there's yellow tape up. Right. But it stretches more than one block, so it would appear that just from the visuals that are available to us, that this van, as they would say in Toronto, mounted the curb.
Correct.
And then drove more than a block on the sidewalk at, according to witnesses, 35 to 40 miles an hour.
That's right.
Just by way of observation and nothing more, it doesn't sound like an accident.
Right. Okay. So in that part of the city, the maximum speed limit would be maybe 35, 40 miles an hour. So if the guy's clicking along at about 40 miles an hour, he's going at the top speed. Again, this is a congested area, so you typically would not be driving that fast. And as you rightly point out, based on the eyewitness accounts, the length of time that he was up on the curb hitting pedestrians, the Canadian media is reporting 1.2 kilometers. So this is upwards of over half a mile if the eyewitness accounts are correct. So that length of time up on the curb hitting pedestrians, also the speed, speaks to a level of purpose in this episode. So we're waiting to see from the Canadian authorities who the individual is, what they know about the motivation, whether others were involved. But again, CTV News, which is the national broadcaster in Canada, is reporting that they've had videos shared with them of the takedown of the suspect at the white van, and they are reporting the suspect waved a dark object at police and claimed to have a weapon. We don't know that to be the case, but this is the reporting of CTV and what they say are the claims of the suspect in the case, Shep.
All right, Catherine, the Reuters news agency, by way of information, is reporting this is 17, 18 miles from downtown Toronto, where members of the G7 are meeting. And at this moment, according to the reporting of Reuters, there's no increased security in the area where members of the G7 were meeting. Additionally, we're getting reports from multiple news organizations that this entire area is beginning to be cordoned off. But as you can see, pedestrian traffic is brisk, I guess, as would be normal. 6 minutes before 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Toronto time, Catherine. It's on a Monday afternoon. Aside from the fact that this has happened, large cordon areas don't appear to have happened.
Right. Well, I can't speak to the G7 element, but I can speak to, again, this section of the city. It's a high traffic, high density business area, as well as a residential area with condos. And this is all going down at a time of day when there's maximum traffic. And again, this is near one of the major transit hubs on the subway line running north-south in the city. It's accurate that it's the northern part of the city. But when people talk about Toronto today, the Greater Toronto area is upwards of 5 million people. This is a very large center. It used to be broken up into several municipalities or boroughs like North York, Scarborough, Mississauga, but they're all part of the what they call the GTA, the Greater Toronto Authority. So it's one large city or urban area, if you will. So Finch Avenue and Yonge Street, in some respects, is it's not downtown proper because it's not near the lakefront, but it's still part of that main business and residential artery in the city. So a lot of traffic, a lot of individuals shopping.
And a live interview happening. Let's listen.
I seen a white van with red coloring on it, and all I saw was that he smashed into someone over there. Then
No, it's okay.
I seen him smash into someone over there. Then I seen him go ahead. I thought he had a heart attack or something, so I was trying to chase it down in a way, almost try to catch up to see what happened. All I seen is this guy is just crumble. I mean, he's going 70, 80 clicks. He's just hitting people one by one, going down. Oh man, it was like it's a nightmare, man. I got to Yonge and Empress, and I seen a lady with her leg, and oh man, it's a gruesome scene. It's really bad out there. I couldn't believe what I seen, man. It was like, oh man, everybody, all these people on the streets getting hit one by one, post office box getting crumbled up on people, and one person got dragged on, and their blood is all over Yonge and Empress. It's really bad out there, man. I'm so shaky. I'm still dying from this. I can't believe this is happening. This is like unbelievable. This is so unbelievable.
Was he swerving towards people?
He just went on the sidewalk. He just started hitting everybody, man. He hit every single person on the sidewalk. Anybody in his way he would hit. The bus stop, everything got shattered. There was a lady in there that I saw. I just stopped and I looked and I went after it again. All I see is just crumbling up one by one, one by one. Holy God, I've never seen a scene like this in my life, I swear.
Did he look like he was doing it with intent, with purpose?
I didn't see the person because it's a blocked van. It's one of those white vans where they're blocked. There's no windows, nothing on this. He's just going down, just crumbling up. You can't catch up to him. He's going 60, 70 kilometers on the sidewalk. Oh, wow.
Did you see the driver? What did he look
No,
like?
I didn't see him, man. I didn't see this guy.
Were you right behind him?
Burns in hell. Whoever that did this, I hope this sick person gets dealt with accordingly. Because this is it's out of this world. This is some serious terrorism stuff right here, what he did. He just killed 30, 40 people at least.
Well, you can imagine the emotions on scene, and I must say that none of those things can we confirm. The witnesses say 45 or so miles per hour this person was traveling on the sidewalk. And no one is discounting anything that he has said, but we have no indication of that number of fatalities from police, and we certainly are of the greatest hope that we don't find that. From authorities in Toronto, we do not have any confirmation, and we will not jump to any conclusions at this point. With history as our guide, I can remember vividly someone turning the wrong way in the middle of Times Square and running over a number of people. It turned out that person was drunk. We don't know what happened here. We'll know soon enough from authorities, and we'll wait for that time. But for now, a complete tragedy in Toronto. Continuing that interview now, let's listen.
Yonge and Sheppard, I've seen people get hit one by one.
Where did you see him climb the sidewalk?